Hello ladies and gentlemen, Big Daddy Top Hat here, the most dashing, well-groomed system specialist in all of cyberspace. Over the last few years we have continued to look at different elements of gaming's rich history every week, and slowly but surely I am aiming to become the #1 console historian in all of time and space. Tomorrow marks the 20-year anniversary of the Sega Dreamcast's North American launch, a day that is difficult to forget due to the system being released on the catchy date of 9999. Sega's last ever mainline platform remains a popular favourite amongst collectors and enthusiasts right up until this very day, despite the fact that we are now 20 years removed from the system's original launch. Sega are still fondly celebrated and remembered for their contributions to the world of console hardware, and whilst the Dreamcast in many ways was a commercial failure, many Sega fans pine for Sega to change their minds and start releasing new systems again. The end of the Sega Dreamcast, along with the company's console plans, was a hard pill to swallow for fans of the brand, but what if I tell you there was for at least a time potentially another way? A way for Sega to have continued partaking in the console wars right up until this day. In today's video we are going to be exploring Sega's working relationship with Microsoft, including what went down and some of the missed opportunities that could have altered all of gaming history as we know it. So let's get down to business, yeah! In February 2013, an ex-Microsoft employee known as Joachim Kempin released some rather interesting information. According to Joachim, he stated that at one point in time Microsoft were heavily considering purchasing Sega as a way to get into the console industry. To quote Kempin regarding this purchase, he stated that there were 3 companies at that point in time. I think this was Sony, Sega and Nintendo. There was always talk maybe we buy Sega or something like that. That never materialised. This thought track by Microsoft appears to have been prior to the Dreamcast's release, due to comments regarding the Dreamcast Kempin would go on to make. This would mean that when Microsoft were considering a Sega purchase, this was most likely during the Sega Saturn's era. I guess the Microsoft buyout must have first been considered due to the success of the original Sony PlayStation, which was living proof that with enough financial backing, the likes of Nintendo could be muscled out of the top spot. The most interesting part of this whole tale is that if this had all taken place, it is very likely that Microsoft would have permanently used Sega as its home console division, which in turn would mean that the whole Xbox line of systems would have never existed. And more importantly, we would probably be receiving Microsoft owned Sega branded and developed consoles right up until this day instead. The whole course of console history would effectively be changed, but on the other hand, who knows what constraints the company would have put on Sega if all this had been allowed to happen. Regardless of this, although it is fun to speculate, history is now history, and the chances of a Sega buyout was apparently squashed by Bill Gates himself. According to Kempin, he states that Bill Gates didn't think that Sega had enough muscle to eventually stop Sony, so we did our own Xbox thing. Now looking back retrospectively, Microsoft probably did make the right decision financially not to buy Sega. After all, as of 2019, the Xbox brand has now officially had a longer run and more longevity in the console race than Sega managed to have prior. Despite the lack of a Sega buyout, this does not mean the Microsoft-Sega story ended here though, as there are further chapters between the two companies, which you could argue have contributed to the Xbox's rise to power. To help understand this relationship, we first have to go back to the Sega Dreamcast and something else mentioned by Kempin. He stated that there was always talk maybe we buy Sega, or something like that. That never materialised, but we were actually able to license them with what they called Windows CE, the younger brother of Windows, to run on their system and make that their platform. With regards to this, you would probably have noticed a small Microsoft Windows CE logo emblazoned on the front of the Dreamcast itself. This endeavour marked Microsoft's first foray into the world of game consoles. To put it simply, Windows CE is an operating system created by Microsoft, which they originally developed for small handheld computers back in 1996. However, an optimized version of this OS was created specifically for the Dreamcast in a collaborative effort between Microsoft and Sega. This working relationship between the two companies allowed Microsoft with an inside look into the development of the Sega Dreamcast, which no doubt must have played some influence into the development of the Microsoft Xbox. As we all know, the Sega Dreamcast would be Sega's swan song into the console wars. However, Sega would shift their focus to developing and publishing third-party games for other systems. Sega were aware of the development of the Xbox, and due to their positive working relationship with Microsoft, wanted to go one step further than simply publishing third-party games for their system. It is alleged that Sega chairman Isao Okawa would reach out to Bill Gates several times after the demise of the Dreamcast, requesting that Microsoft modify their Xbox, allowing the system backwards compatibility with all previously released Dreamcast games. All in all, giving the Dreamcast library a second wind, if you were, which could have been beneficial to both companies, in that it would have boosted Sega game sales whilst giving the Xbox a further selling point over the PlayStation 2 and GameCube. Sadly, as we know, this deal was never to come into fruition, apparently due to the fact that infrastructurally it would have been too difficult to achieve, especially when knowing playing Dreamcast games online using an Xbox, it would have clashed with Microsoft's brand new Xbox Live service. Whilst there was no Dreamcast backwards compatibility for the original Xbox, in 2001 Sega and Microsoft did, however, announce a new partnership between the two companies, which would include the release of 11 new Sega games that would all be released exclusively on the original Xbox platform, in some ways making the Xbox the go-to platform for leftover die-hard Sega fans over the time period. The links between the Xbox and Dreamcast do not end there though either. All you have to do is look at the system's controllers to clearly see that influence for the Xbox controller has been heavily taken from that of the Dreamcast. To enforce this motion further, the Xbox's prototype controller looks even more Dreamcast-esque, and hilariously even included a VMU memory card slot. Another interesting chapter in the Dreamcast and Xbox story relates to the release of Shenmue 2. A gentleman known as Peter Moore, who was the president and COO of Sega America, cancelled Shenmue 2 from the Dreamcast altogether in the region, and instead handed over an exclusivity agreement to the Xbox in the area, meaning that Shenmue 2 was an Xbox exclusive over there. Mr. Moore was of the thought track that there was no point in continuing to release Dreamcast games in the territory, and is quoted to have said, "We expect the title will be a killer app on the Xbox, and that the technical capabilities of the platform will surely bring the game to new levels in terms of graphics and experience." Interestingly, when it came to Shenmue 2, Mr. Moore could not be more wrong, as the Xbox version of Shenmue 2 sold terribly in North America, while Sega diehards in the region would simply import the Dreamcast version of the game, which was readily available over in Europe anyway. All in all, the relationship between Sega and Microsoft was certainly interesting over this period, and the two companies would consistently team up throughout the life cycle of both the Dreamcast and the original Xbox. For this reason, many people now see the Xbox as the spiritual sequel to the Dreamcast, and some people even think of it as the Dreamcast 2. Going by this logic though, does this make the Xbox One really the Dreamcast 4? Well, I guess it kind of is, when you look and notice that the system's controller is still the continued evolution from back in the Dreamcast days. However, I'll let you answer that ridiculous question in the comments section. Anyway, there were a lot of plans executed and some interesting near misses, such as the Dreamcast backwards compatibility and the total Microsoft buyout of Sega. However, history is now history, and we are where we are now today. Which leads me to one final question for you all. Are you happy with how it all panned out in the end? Or would you have preferred it if the Sega buyout had actually transpired? I'm genuinely really curious to hear all of your thoughts, so answers down below please. If you enjoyed this video, then I would greatly appreciate it if you could like, comment and subscribe to receive multiple videos on obscure gaming history straight to your phone or multimedia device. I'll be back next video with the answers to some Patreon questions at the end of the video. So if you're a patron of this channel, Send me a question and I'll add it to a video shortly. With this in mind, my channel Top Hat Gaming Man is funded by the fantastic support I receive from my amazing Patreon supporters, whose support really do mean the world to me. So a huge thank you and a massive shout out to Carl Johnson, Shuka Kobayashi, JD Robbins, Greg Hooper, Seabass Great, Sin Spaces, Andrew Bazanski, Edward O'Reilly, Quang DX, Swaz Matt B, Michael Baker, Hans Christian, Computer Man, Antonio Rodriguez, and all of my other patrons. Thank you all for changing my life.